participants. Oh, that's okay, Heather. Thank you for recording it. We appreciate it. So I just want to remind you guys that there's a good incentive going on that we have through the NAR for the green designation, which is the 2-day course in October. If you attend 4 out of the 5 Latte and Learn green building sessions, you'll get a $100 discount on the designation course, which is a 50% savings. Registration is open for the remainder of the Latte and Learn green building sessions on CAR. You can go to the CAR education and events calendar for that. Interesting fact as well, only 2.6% of the CAR membership has the green designation, so it's a great way to stand out among your competitors as well. So I want to say thank you to our Green Building Series sponsors. The presenting sponsor is Virginia Credit Union, and our event sponsors are Birch Studio, Fulton Mortgage, Guaranteed Rate, and UVA Community Credit Union and Member Options. And they're helping to make this incentive possible for us. So if you see those folks, please make sure you thank them. And since we're not able to visit with these sponsors in person, there are handouts. There's a link in the chat box to have more information about the companies. At this time, I would like to invite John Madeira of Virginia Credit Union to share a few words.
Appreciate that, Josh. This was a spare of the moment opportunity since our sponsor, Rob, usually does this. So we'll give a little historical background about Virginia Credit Union, and I am the mortgage loan officer. Talk a little bit about our products. The Virginia Credit Union is the largest Virginia-based credit union in Virginia. We have others like PenFed, but they're not homegrown. So Virginia Credit Union has branches in Richmond, Fredericksburg, Farmville, and in Charlottesville. We were established in 1920 as a state employees credit union, but we have branched out. As long as you are a resident of the state of Virginia, you can become a member, and we offer the services that you normally would at a big bank or small car loans, mortgages, investments as well. So with mortgages, basically we do your standard mortgages that you would find at any large bank, your conventional mortgages, your government mortgages, which are FHA, VA, USDA. We do specialize as a credit union in certain mortgages, like for doctors. We have a doctor program. We got a land program. Mentioning land is a big, obviously, opportunity this year. And we had just established a construction program. So that is just rolled out in May. So we offer those services for those builders and agents that are having opportunities for your clients. We also do Virginia Housing Development, VHDA. We're one of the only credit unions in Virginia that actually do provide that service for our members. So we have a program that work with right now through FHA, which is a second mortgage down payment. We also do jumbo loans, and we do 100% financing for second-time home buyers. So there's a lot of different programs that we can offer that the bigger banks may not be, especially land and construction, which is a big driver here today, I'm sure, with your conversation. And obviously the things that builders and real estate agents are looking for is, can you close loans on time? Yes. We've established a process in place that we do that through electronic means and follow up with processors to make sure your clients will close on time, as well as be able to provide competitive rates, as well as be able to make sure that they have that ability to communicate through electronic means, telephone, in person. So as a traditional mortgage company, just like the Quickens of the world, we provide that where you can upload your documents, you can apply online, you can meet in person, you can do it over the phone, as well as the different products that we do offer here. And we're just glad to be part of today, because we just rolled out our construction program and we're looking for opportunities to help our clients in the Charlottesville area. So that's basically it, Josh.
Hey, great. Thank you, John. We appreciate you guys being here. Appreciate the sponsorship. So, well, let's go ahead and get started with today's session. And I'm going to turn it over to Don, Jacob, and Caroline. And so I'll let you guys take the mic.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Don Franco, and I'm sharing my screen so you guys can see the presentation. Today, we were asked to start to address some issues associated, or how the site and land process works. We're starting out really at a sort of a broad level on the planning issue, talking about location, lot sizes, house orientation, and then we'll focus more on the implementation side with the stormwater management and the landscaping, followed by a question and answer period. When we talk about the green aspects, a lot of the questions that I was hearing were associated with the wildlife disruption, who decides the proximity to work, to services, to schools. This all comes about in the beginning through the comp plan process. Each of the surrounding communities, counties and city have their own comp plans in Virginia, and the comp plans are where they do a community level planning to address the issues that I just talked about. So where do we want growth to occur? How do we get services to those areas? How do they relate to the schools? Most of what I'm going to talk about is a focus on Albemarle because that's what I'm most familiar with, but all these surrounding companies have it. The table over here, the two tables are the table of contents from the Albemarle's plan. You can see that they start to go through some of the issues that we're talking about with the housing, parks, community facilities, and they start with a very broad approach, and then they go to specific plans for specific areas. A quick little summary of how Albemarle works. It started back in 1971, and it really hasn't changed, in my opinion, dramatically. At least the area that we're talking about hasn't changed. What's really happened is that over time, there's been a lot more focus on providing clarity and specificity around the plan itself. Over here on the right-hand side, you can see the 2010 future land use for the Crozet area, the Crozet master plan, and what is the draft that's in front of the group now that's being reviewed and discussed. And this is where you'll start to see the areas about the environment, the greenways, the blueways, where they see growth occurring and how. An example of the clarity is really these circles that are being added now, where the focus is, where do we want some of the centers in our community to be? These will be the focal points where we want to direct development, commercial areas, services. It's all being planned at that comp plan level. Like I said, I think the comp plan starts very general, and then they start to add, in Albemarle's case, master plans and small area plans. This is the plan that is dealing with the southern area of 29. And so you can see on the plan just the different levels of information that are here. The green areas along the Rivanna River, the different densities that they expect for the residential areas, where they expect to have commercials. And other good examples are right down in this area where they talk about where connections will be and how they plan on addressing the transportation network. As we talk about, again, sort of how this all comes together, I would say for new development, the real drivers are first tier kind of components are the zoning, the comp plan, and then of course the availability and the price of the land. The next set of drivers that really come along are sort of the developer side, which is the cost to purchase, the cost to develop, and the sales income to make sure the projects work. But this is the core of how decisions are made with respect to where development's going to take place and what it's going to look like. We were also asked to talk a little bit about lot size, and the question that was coming up for me was the smaller houses and lot size and how they are green due to energy usage. I think energy usage has played a part on it, and that's made housing greener, but it's probably, in my opinion, less associated with lot size and lot house, but more on the technology that's changed over time. I think the technology, when I say that, it's the improved construction techniques, it's the designations of green build, it's the improved materials, and also the systems, so the refrigerators, HVAC, that's been more of a component towards green than I would say lot size. What's really driving lot size is back to those comp plans where people are laying this out, the community's laying this out ahead of time where they're deciding, hey, this is where we want growth to be and what it to look like. Pick two areas in Albemarle This is up here on the left at Hollymead. You can kind of see the lot sizes and how it laid out. And this is Belvedere. So you can see right away that Belvedere is already looking a little bit smaller as far as lot sizes. And again, it's been less of a focus on green build, but more of a focus in Albemarle on the neighborhood model and recommendations. Now, this is all built into a green approach for the community, but not specifically to a particular house or any product. The idea is that with the neighborhood model, they're trying to change the form of development from suburban, like Forest Lakes, to an urban form, more like downtown Charlottesville. And in doing so, you're seeing a different kind of product coming out. You're seeing really the setbacks, the houses being closer to each other. And this is something that the county is encouraging. And again, I think the change to green is part of this. It's making more walkable communities. It's putting uses closer to the residential surfaces versus necessarily jumping on 29 and having to go somewhere. The next component, again, on the neighborhood model, we showed this picture earlier, is showing the different centers that they're creating. There's really, in Albemarle, the focus has been to focus growth in the growth area. It's more economical, it's greener to provide services like schools, school buses, fire services, the public services to the urban areas, to a smaller, close-in urban area than it is to provide that service further out to the rural areas. So the comp plan and the focus of Albemarle's growth management plan is to emphasize a higher density in the urban areas. So what drives lot sizes in the urban areas? It's really, again, it's back to the zoning and the comprehensive plan and site-specific features. You can see on this picture where the roads are kind of going different ways, but the lots are different sizes depending on where you are. And a lot of that has to deal with the site features of the area. And of course, the market is what's driving things. So the comprehensive plan is a great source of information. The county also produces a growth management report periodically. This is from the 2019 growth management report, and it shows you where and kind of what is expected to develop. So again, for me, it helps to emphasize that this is all being laid out ahead of time by the comprehensive plan. The numbers in boxes show what was sold or built in, I think it was 2019 time period. So most of the construction's been occurring in Crozet, not a surprise there. And then you can see the different neighborhoods where things are expected. The colored dots are showing what is anticipated to happen in the future. The blue dots represent approved development projects. The size of the dot indicates the size of the project. The pink is showing where the multifamily and townhouse projects are, and the yellow is showing potential future single-family developed projects. This again is based on the comprehensive plan. So lot size in general, I think, like I said, is being determined early on in the process. One of the other aspects that we were asked to look at was to talk about site orientation or house orientation. The general idea being if you're going to take advantage of passive solar to orient the house in a southern direction. If you're going to use wind, then figure out where the prevailing winds are and to orient the house in that direction. One of the interesting graphics I've seen in the past has been an analysis of the street networks in different cities. And you can see that there's kind of grid-like patterns in different places that have been established and are more urban in nature. When you get to places like Charlotte, where, and I would say Albemarle, Charlottesville, where the roads are really starting out more rural and have filled in over time versus having been planned, it's a bit more chaotic about how the road network lives. It's not as grid-like system. Downtown Charlottesville would be more grid-like. If you look at Crozet, again, on those past drawings here, you see that the roads are starting to point a lot of different directions. So what's really happening as far as orientation of the house? I think we're finding that the bigger level planning of the creeks, the road network, the initial road network is what really decides how houses are oriented. This one on the left is Ashland with our, excuse me, what's the one up on top of Pantops?
Highland Ridge.
Which one?
Highland Ridge.
Ashcroft. This is Ashcroft up here, I think, at Highland Ridge. So the houses, the lots are a little bit larger, but you can see what's driving it is really on the marketing side, the focus of presenting the house to the street and how the streetscape looks, and then knowing that terrain, how the houses will sit on the land. Another example is the Cascadia development up on Pantops area, and how the network was put in order to access the property is really what's dictating it. It seems like the house orientation is less of a focus until you get to a certain lot size, or if you have a certain density that allows you to be flexible. I think as I looked around at projects, Eco Village was one of the Eco Village is one of the only places where, and I think some of this was sort of luck of the land layout and everything else, was a place where they were able to incorporate the considerations of wind and solar into that project for about half or a third of their houses. So in general, it's really driven by the streetscapes and the topography, the terrain, and not until you get to that certain size of house will you expect to see the ability to rearrange the house, orient the house differently to focus strictly on orientation and the benefits of having passive solar and wind onto the project. That's a lot of information all at once. I'm expecting to generate more questions and give you specific answers, but wanted to at least touch upon that group of topics for this Coffee and Learn. Now I'd like to turn it over to Jacob and Caroline for their site-specific components.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jacob Bucher with Wetland Studies. One second, we'll be sharing our presentation here for stormwater and native landscaping.
Come on.
I'm going to pass it over to Caroline to start off.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm Caroline Hollandsworth. Jacob introduced himself. Today, we'll be talking about residential stormwater management, why it's so important, and we'll be also touching on some stormwater facilities and the importance of those in a residential setting. You can go ahead and progress the slide, Jacob. To start, we wanted to do a broad overview of residential stormwater management, why it's so important. So in our neighborhoods and developed areas, we see that we're increasing that impervious area with rooftops and pavement, which prevent precipitation from naturally soaking into the ground. Without these stormwater facilities that we're going to touch on today, that increases the runoff and can cause downstream flooding, stream bank erosion, as well as habitat destruction. So we want to implement these as much as possible. Moving on to permeable pavement is our first stormwater facility that we wanted to touch on. We'll go over functionality, maintenance, and then some common issues that you'll see with some of these stormwater facilities. Permeable pavement is just an alternative to paving. Instead of allowing that runoff to move across the pavement, it actually allows it to soak in to that filter through that paving surface into an underlying stone reservoir. Maintenance does include mowing the grass and the grid paver applications, removing any built up soil or sediment that's deposited onto the pavement, some spot weeding of grass applications. You can also use a vacuum pavement, which with street sweeper to prevent any clogging if there is that buildup of sediment or sand. Some common issues if you do not maintain these are clogging of the paved surface at the choke layer or the stone reservoir with sediment, as well as cracking of the paved surfaces or joints. If you see that the runoff is not spreading evenly across that surface and it begins to pond, that's when you know that you're going to need some maintenance because of some clogging issues. We'll move on to rainwater collection. This is the process where rainwater falls onto the rooftops and it's then conveyed into an above ground or below ground storage tank. It can then be used for non-potable water sources such as landscaping or exterior washing. Some maintenance includes removing leaves or debris from gutters and downspouts, as well as removing any debris from the pre-screening devices. Some maintenance can prevent that overflow and clogging of the pre-treatment. That overflow can cause the pre-screen to kind of pop off, which then allows mosquitoes to get into your storage and infest. So you'll want to make sure that you're keeping up with that maintenance. Some other issues that we can see are freezing during the winter months. Moving on to grass swales. This is one of the most common ones you'll see on residential sites. This is just a vegetated swale that's designed to convey and filter that stormwater while also reducing that velocity. While it's reducing that velocity, it reduces the runoff and pollutants by slowing down and allowing it to infiltrate through the soil. Maintenance includes removing any accumulated sediment or sand that may build up into these swales. You also need to repair any erosion. You'll need to regularly mow these areas. And then if you do have check dams, you'll need to make sure that they're functioning properly and repairing them if needed. Some common issues that you might see with these are erosion, standing water, and overgrowth of vegetation.
And I'll jump in here to discuss bioretentions and a few other stormwater opportunities. Bioretentions are engineered facilities that you'll see in residential communities and on residential lots as well. Becoming more and more popular because they're smaller scale practices that uptake a lot more nutrients than some of these larger stormwater ponds that you'll see in older communities. Maintenance is pretty common. It's needed to make sure it actually functions correctly. And if you're looking to get credits, it's also required. Mowing of grass, spot weeding, replacing mulch, removing sediment, repairing sediment, like erosion on the slopes and such. Common issues would be a clogged filter layer. This happens pretty common with older bioretention facilities when they had the fabric in them. Replacing dead plant material. This is critical for receiving those credits as well and not becoming a failed facility, especially in the county or the city's eyes. Plant material is actually critical for uptake of nutrients and making sure it's functioning correctly. Another big one, just as a residential review as a whole, is runoff management. Runoff from roof, driveways, patios, anything like that is a big source for erosion and movement of soil and sediment and no uptake of nutrients. So managing those point sources of runoff is key, whether that's through another hard surface or slowing it down so it's not causing an offsite impact down the road or down the stream or watershed. Now we're going to move into a little bit on residential landscaping. We touch on why landscaping is important and why native plants are important as well. A planned and landscaped property can provide many benefits, not just curb appeal and sale price. Suburban lawns and landscapes interrupt the continuous landscape mosaics, offering safe passage to wildlife and habitats. Additionally, if cared for properly, it's another tool to reduce the impacts of stormwater runoff. Native plants are critical to building that ecosystem and ensuring we continue that landscape mosaic. Native plants are adapted to local climate and soil conditions, so they require less upkeep. Native plants don't require fertilizers and require less pesticides. Native plants are used to the hardiness zone, so they require less water as well. And we want to use native plants instead of invasive species to ensure that our native species in Virginia continue to exist and thrive. And then kind of last, we want to touch on a potential options for shade trees in residential settings. Strategically placed trees can be effective as other energy saving home improvements such as insulation and installation of watertight windows and doors. Trees can help reduce your heating and cooling costs. Trees will save energy through cooling in the hotter months. They provide a windbreak during the winter. And all this results in burning less fossil fuels to generate electricity for cooling and heating. So we've got a couple examples pulled up for shade trees: little leaf linden, tulip tree, black gum, red oak, American sycamore, river birch. A lot of great options in Virginia. We've got a great abundance of native trees that have large crowns that can provide shading benefits in a residential setting. That's all for me and Caroline today. Ready to hear some questions, and thanks again for having us.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you, Don, Jacob, Caroline. Yeah, we can open up the session for some questions at this point. You're welcome to either put them in the chat. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Or if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and we can ask one of these three folks.
Hi there, Candace here. I was wondering, as far as any cost or regulation for the impervious sidewalks and driveways and roads and things like that for new communities or redoing existing communities, if anyone can touch base on that.
Costs for installation, maintenance, or like requirements for implementing them in newer developments?
Yes, to all of that.
Most of these developments are requiring some sort of stormwater treatment because of the increase in impervious surface. So they're requiring a set target goal for treatment area of impervious surfaces that are new to the area. And then on top of that, you'll see the city of Charlottesville has a stormwater credit program or stormwater fee program, and implementing new stormwater facilities on residential lots will actually decrease that fee program. There's a long application setting for that, but it's a manner to get that stormwater fee down as well.
Yeah, I think as far as costs go for the construction side, the installation, I think we've been seeing on projects that we've done this on in the past that it's going to be, as far as the material and the installation, twice or three times as expensive as typical asphalt or concrete. We're actually finding a lot of pushback while it's being encouraged by, I think at a national level, it's being discouraged by the localities. You know, it's kind of between things. They want to see it, but they don't want to have maintenance responsibilities. They don't want to have the responsibilities to make sure someone is maintaining it, because it does have a lot of maintenance. Did a project in the city with Sunrise, with Habitat, and there was concrete parking and sidewalks in that project. And again, those were the kind of issues that took longer to get the road accepted in the end, even though they liked the concept. The steps we had to do and the costs that were associated ended up a lot more expensive. They're easier to design, they're easier to put in, and they meet all the goals, but we tend to see that, at least on our side, we're seeing them as more expensive and a lot more regulation to get them in.
Great, good question.
Thank you.
Another good question, a little more discussion on orientation of a property, I guess, and then the wind effect on the efficiency of a home. Is there a specific orientation that's the best for that?
A southern orientation is typically the best orientation for the solar component of it. You want to have the sun across alongside of the house for the most part. What was kind of interesting as I was preparing for this, I started looking around and trying to figure out if there was a lot size where you started to see people take advantage of that. And even when I was looking at Monticello, and then there's a house on top of Carter's Mountain, that's a relatively new house. When those things went in, they have some of that orientation, but it seems like the drivers for orientation are that the house is more driven by looks and terrain. So looks by that, I mean the views from the house, than they are by orientation. And I think a lot of that is simply because of the technology that's come around, that you can overcome poor orientation if you've got the right economic system in there. But south is the way you want to go for the sun. And then on the wind, it varies on location. You have to do wind studies. I think the Eco Village over on Rio Road was an example of a place where they did that. And most of that orientation was, I believe, south and east a little bit.
Cool, thank you. What other questions do we have?
Sorry, Candace again. I've got another question. I've got a number of clients that are in the process of trying to get a property under contract, which is its own struggle. But one of the major things is that they want to ensure they can have solar, and it really decreases the amount of money they're saving for down payment. And the cost, although over time it's a great benefit, is there any leg to stand on as far as like these other products that are coming out, like solar shingles and other incentives to try to get the costs down from the upfront solar investment?
That's probably more of a builder kind of question. I've had some experience. I've got some friends that are in solar, and my understanding is they've gotten it down to maybe 5-year return period. But I think any of those systems that you're talking about are investments that take time to come across. There's still a lot of debate as to whether solar is good because of the toxins and different things that are involved in the process of creating the panels, as well as disposal of the panels. But I think anything that you choose along those lines, it's going to be at least a 5 to 10 year period for your return. And so all that is coming at a premium.
Hey, Candace. I will share that Josh and I are working on a new class for agents on solar, and hopefully in the next few weeks we'll come up with that's probably, that wasn't the angle we were going for the class, but that's probably something to throw in there, Josh, to work on for sure. Yeah. Hey, Don Franco, how are you doing?
Hello, Mr. Slater. I'm doing wonderful. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I have a question for you. I had to take a call, so hopefully this wasn't discussed, but is there anything you can share with us from a standpoint of what's on the horizon to come out of the pipeline next that's made of a significant development residentially?
No.
Do you have any thoughts on long-term supply of residential lots based on the fact that we have communities where builders are literally have contracts on unplatted lots and can't even start the homes yet? We're that far ahead on sales?
No, I think the approval process has always been the struggle, I think, on the land development side. I went through a lot of my information very quickly. It's a pretty big topic, but I think the gist of it is they know what they want and where they want it as a community. We know where we want to see development. We have a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like, whether it's single family and townhouses, yet it takes years to get something through the approval and design process. That makes it really cumbersome in a market like today. My company's doing the engineering side these days, and so we're heavily involved in that process. And it's just a struggle. We've got a number of projects where, I know the builders you're talking about, they're sitting there, with more or less contracts on unplatted, undesigned lots right now. And I think the process is improving over time, but I don't see it getting a lot better. But I do see that we're going to continue to be able to meet a certain amount of product at one time. I don't see that the community is going to shut down home construction, because we can't deliver lots. I just don't see that happening. But where it's going to be next, there are a lot of different developments that are on the tables now trying to get through that process.
Thanks.
Thank you, Greg.
I have a question for Caroline, please. Caroline, is there any attention being paid to any new thinking on the maintenance or management of detention ponds? I own property in an area where there is one, and we're restricted to mowing it, that is to say, maintaining it, to twice a year. And obviously, the degree of vegetation is entirely dependent on the amount of rainfall. But we do the mosquito drops, but I was wondering if there was any attention being paid to removal of things that are not necessarily good and planting any grasses or small bushes or anything that might be of value.
Yeah, there are companies that maintain those BMPs, as well as get rid of those invasive species or of unwanted vegetation. You're gonna have to maintain it. That's just kind of gonna be a thing you're probably gonna have to do regardless. But in terms of the frequency of maintaining it is probably based on the county that you live in. And that's a requirement that comes from the county. Jacob, did you have anything to add? I know you're kind of the BMP.
I mean, most of the time,
specialist.
our mowing frequency normally is 4 times a year, especially in Maryland, where I'm based out of. But we also do algicide applications to clear out water, which sounds like you're trying to kind of hit that, Pat. And then as far as planting additional species, it's really going to be based on the design. So a lot of these detention ponds are actually being phased out because of their eyesore to some degree, and then they're actually not the greatest at treating water quality. They're great at controlling water quantity. So they're moving away from those for the most part. You could get away with planting some native species on there, but you're still going to have to maintain that facility.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Sorry, I had another question. Is there any topic or discussion about trying to utilize, again, stormwater management and impervious surfaces in new construction and communities to where they might be able to utilize hydro for like powering maybe a small grid, like, you know, street lights or things like that? Or is that not something that's in development?
I can't recall any discussions like that.
Yeah, I don't see that coming to fruition anytime soon. You'd have to have a pretty large scale development. It would have to be an initiative that the developer was interested in, because it would have to happen at a development or project scale as opposed to an individual house scale. But similar to solar, I think some of the challenges are the combining that electricity that's generated from that into the grid, and the permitting process for doing that. So I haven't seen anything that's proposing to take on those challenges at this point.
Good. We have one question in the chat about invasive species versus native plantings. And so the question was, are you finding use of native trees and plants causing difficulties due to invasive species? So an example would be like black gum trees sending shoots underground for that sort of thing.
Notice the question, like a little more clarification, if the difficulties being caused for native growth from invasives or such. I mean, it's a common theme is the native species are going to outgrow and to exceed over the native species. It's a matter of giving the native species a chance to thrive and controlling the invasive species by routine maintenance, whether it's mechanical, herbicide, whatever it may be.
Thank you, sir. Anything else, guys?
Josh, I had a question along the lines of invasive species, because owning a few acres and being out in the country, have to deal with some that were imported decades ago, namely wisteria, Chinese wisteria. And I've seen properties that deal with bamboo groves that gets rather invasive. I was just wondering, and I saw in the chat, you mentioned black gum. What other really truly invasive species are we dealing with here in Central Virginia? And how much of an issue is it in terms of control? I don't even talk about eradication because you can't seem to make any of this go away. But yeah, what are others that we have to deal with around here?
Your big ones are going to be Japanese stiltgrass, mile a minute, wisteria, which you mentioned, Lespedeza, which is like Japanese tea grass, multiflora rose, bittersweet, honeysuckle. Those are kind of your big guys. Johnson grass here and there. Are you having any luck controlling that wisteria?
Mechanical means.
Yep.
I mean, I put on the gloves and I pull and I cut. Yeah, as long as you keep it, you just keep at it because it can get away from you quickly. But kudzu is another one. I'm sure everyone's driven along and seen entire hillsides covered with this. So yeah.
Guys, why do you think bamboo does so well in Central Virginia? It thrives and it's hard to get rid of it.
Nothing else. There's nothing else really to combat it when it starts off growing so fast. I mean, it really grows so quick, and unless it gets shaded out, and it can still deal with the shade pretty well too. So it's got plenty of moisture, plenty of sunlight, and there's nothing outgrowing it.
Well, great. I think this kind of underlines how many hats we wear as realtors, and all the different questions that our clients throw at us. And it's always good to know people who are the experts on it, to be able to put them in touch with the folks who know the answers. So, and also for us to be a little dangerous with some of the information, right? So thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. Appreciate y'all's time and just being able to be willing to share with us. So our next screen building series session is going to focus on fixtures and finishes. That's going to be Friday, August 20th at 9 a.m. So finishes and fixtures. So make sure you mark your calendar for that. I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us today. I hope you have a great weekend, and we will see you in August.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Good.